We have apologies for absence from Councillors Mike White and Councillor Bridget Rowlands, Councillor David Jenkins. And we've also had officer apologies from Tom Price. Tom Evans. Next item on the agenda is disclosure of personal and prejudicial interests. Any members? Any officers? No. Okay. The next item, item 3, is the one that's on all scrutiny panels, and that's the prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. Okay, then we move on to item 4, minutes of the previous meetings, which include the 12th of March and the 9th of April. Everybody happy that these are a true and accurate record? Okay, well, thank you. Then we move on to item 5, which is public questions. And Rachel, I don't think we have any.
No public questions.
Then we move directly on to item 6, which is the audit reports springing forward. We have Non Jenkins from the Audit Wales who will present the report, and Councillor David Hopkins, Cabinet member, who will be to answer any questions that we may have. Also, can I welcome Rachel Davis, Head of HR and Service Centre. I'm not sure if this is the first time you've been to performance, but there we are. If you have, welcome again. Okay, can I then hand over to Non Jenkins? Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for having me today. Unfortunately, Bethan, who undertook the work, isn't in work at the moment. She's off on maternity leave, so I'm covering for her today. And thank you also in particular to all the officers and members that were involved in contributing to this work. As you know, this was a thematic piece of work that's what we call it, a thematic, when we do it across all 22 councils in Wales. And since you've got this report in front of you, we've also pulled the national summary together, which is on our website if you'd like to read that too. I won't take you through in great detail because obviously I'm assuming you will have read it, and I'm sure the Cabinet member will want to talk to it, as well as maybe Rachel will want to talk to it too, in terms of how you're taking it forward. But in general, the council is this is a good report in that sense, and that you have a vision in place and you've strengthened the work with your partners. But at the time of our work, when we did this work, you were yet to find resources to deliver the long-term resources to deliver the strategy. And I know that you've got actions in place to deal with that in the short term. And we came to this conclusion because it was clear that you had a vision for workforce, and that you'd started on this actually before the COVID pandemic. We know that the COVID pandemic actually hastened, I suppose, the workforce strategies in most public services across Wales. But Swansea had already begun the work before COVID, which is great to hear. So you were building on it, really, building on that the foundations that you'd already put in place at that point in time to be able to help you transform. You're also taking action to strengthen your approach to your workforce management by collaborating with partners and other councils as well as other colleges. And again, but it isn't yet resourced in terms of how you deliver the strategy in the long term. And then the council, we also came to the conclusion that the council had appropriate arrangements for monitoring your workforce arrangements too. But there's an opportunity, like with other councils across Wales, because this was a national conclusion that we came to, in order to how you benchmark, how you work together to measure how well you're doing against others could improve. That's not just for you, that's across Wales in particular. So in general, as I said, this is a good report for the council, and hope that you will have looked at how you're resourcing this going forward for the long term. And in that, I'll hand over to anybody else, the Cabinet member or Rachel, to take you through it further.
Okay, thank you very much, Don. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Audit Wales for this very positive report. I will say I think it's really encouraging to hear that it's been noted that we're already on this journey well before COVID. We identified that we needed the workforce strategy to take us forward into the next century and or the next period of this council. And to be honest with you, I think it's really encouraging, the report, to identify some areas, particularly around benchmarking, that we should improve. And I'm more than happy with some things that we are doing to improve on that. Some time ago, Welsh Government during COVID did suspend all benchmarking. So obviously we are now on the back foot, but working towards that. Resources, we have got in place some further resources taking us up to 2025, but that will be reviewed at that point. I've got nothing more to add, but to thank Audit Wales for the positive report and assure them that I know that Rachel would want to come in and add her sort of look at observations of the report as well. So more than happy to take any questions later on, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hopkins. Rachel?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to echo Cabinet members' comments, really we are pleased with the outcome of the report. The areas for recommendation in there are, as Audit Wales have just said, benchmarking is not unique for Swansea as a recommendation. That is featuring across a number of other local authorities in their recommendations. And I would just like to remind committee, I suppose, in terms of assurance, we reported our full year one progress against the workforce strategy to the Scrutiny Programme Committee back in February. So if you were members at that attendance, you would have had an in-depth analysis of how we've been able to drive forward the first year of the workforce strategy. And I'm also pleased to say that Programme Board, so that's the Workforce and OD Programme Board, which Councillor Hopkins is chair of that board, met on 24th of April, I think it was, and we've now also agreed our objectives for year two of the programme. So we are very much on track, delivering the objectives we set out to deliver in year one, adding more to it in year two so that we can front load and get through as many of those key activities as we can with the resource levels that we have before we then review that from 2025 onwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I have a number of questions from Councillor David Jenkins. I'll read them out, but I think we've sent them to you for a written answer. How was the delivery plan measured? Is it individuals or teams? How do we measure the skills, performance and resources and engagement? In the measure on skill, performance and resources and engagement, are low an individual and team? What is the improvement plans? If the first year focus on skills, performance, resources, engagement, what do the 2 years and 3 years focus on then? So those are the questions, but I think a written answer will be more appropriate on this particular time. Councillor Peter Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to, first of all, well, congratulations. It is a positive report, and that's great. Obviously, it highlights some things for the future which still needs to be worked on, which is I'd be surprised if it didn't do that. So I just wanted to pick up a couple of issues in the report itself, particularly paragraph 18. Specific areas, it does not yet have a comprehensive view of the workforce's needs and related issues for it to address. And this talks about making sure we have a diverse workforce which represents the community. And of course, in particular, I'm interested in how we're addressing shortage areas. So we know we've got a shortage of building control people. We know we've got a shortage in terms of social workers. We had that for decades. And also, I mean, we did the Welsh language scrutiny a few months ago in the programme committee, and I've just had a letter back from that, saying that we're also having trouble recruiting Welsh speaking staff to deal with the public through the medium of Welsh. So I'm just interested how we're attacking those particular shortage issues and making sure that the workforce is actually representative of the community.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Couple of things to update you on there. So regards the first point you make around the workforce needs. So we've carried out a development needs analysis piece of work with a service area from the Place Directorate who kindly volunteered to test that for us. We will be in the process now in year two of rolling that out to the rest of the council. So that will give us the baseline in terms of the skills gap, and then we'll be able to look at the identified interventions to close the gaps that are identified within that. We've also just published the strategic equality plan, which has got workforce objectives set within that. So in terms of encouraging our workforce to be more diverse, we are looking at objectives in there that are around, yes, the data demographic set of the existing workforce, but also building of staff networks from across different protected characteristic types, etc. So there are 4 objectives within the strategic equality plan that we will be starting work on now in that area. And then recruitment features as our top priority in year 2 of the workforce strategy. So the objectives that were signed off at the end of April by board, recruitment and retention features as number 1 on that list, really. So we will be not only looking at our turnover, which for 23-24 we've just had in as a council as a whole, it's 9.5%. We have broken that down by area so that we can see where we've got pockets of issues, as opposed to it's actually not that much of a problem, despite perhaps some anecdotal feedback around that. And then we will be able to, again, target the areas that need the intervention, identify those hard to fill posts. We want to build some new recruitment set around matrix, such as length of time to fill a vacancy, so that we can then start narrowing again those gaps.
Can I just move on to paragraph 21? And you're talking about the workforce strategy, and I know we've started to scrutinise that in the programme committee. But paragraph 21 says you need to continue to work towards the development of a workforce plan. So what's the plan? Is the implementation of the strategy, I assume. So what's the sort of timescale for that?
So we've just had a full set back of workforce plans for each service area across the council. So HRNOD asked council heads of service to align their workforce plan with their service plan for the year. So we now have had the full set back. That's only been within the last couple of weeks. So our activity now as a result is to go through those plans and then create our council overarching workforce plan, and we will publish that this year.
And then finally, on paragraph 26, I think resources is the big issue, isn't it? The report is talking about identifying financial resources for its short-term actions and also for the long-term delivery of the strategy. I mean, are you happy you have the resources to put this into effect, or we're going to have to do more work on the budgeting for that?
I think everyone would always say they'd like more resources is the easy answer to that. I think we are doing what we can with what we have. We are very grateful that we've had transformation funding for additional posts within HRNOD to be able to work through some of the activities and objectives within that strategy. As I said earlier, we are trying to front load it and get as much of the content done within the first 2 years whilst we have those resources as possible, so that when we come to the perhaps second half of the lifespan, it's more manageable within then the substantive budget that we have for the team. We will have to carefully consider what 2026 to 2030 looks like, and perhaps manage expectation around what is able to be delivered with resource levels that we have. But I think that's probably a conversation for 12 months time, when we've seen how much have we been able to do. And then the question comes in around, well, is the aspiration to continue to do that level, or is it to drop back? And we can look at all options at that time.
Are there any other members? No? If that's the case, can I thank Rachel, thank Councillor Hopkins, and thank Dan Jenkins for the delivery of the report. Thank you very much. Can we move on to the next item on the agenda? Is the item 7, which is the planning annual performance report. Councillor Hopkins, do you want to start this off?
Yeah, if I could just open the report and present, I will ask Ian to present the report itself. But I would like to put on record my thanks to Ian, the team, and also the planning committee for what is a very positive report again. I think we're very fortunate that if you compare us, particularly benchmarking across Wales, I think we've done exceptionally well. There's far more, I know there is a resource issue about finances, but I know the minister at this particular time is looking at planning fees at this particular time. So hopefully by the end of this quarter, we might be in a better position to know about planning fees. So more than happy to hand over to Ian, but put my thanks on record to the team.
Councillor Hopkins, can I welcome Mr. Ian Davis, who is the head of planning? Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. The annual performance report is a mechanism which Welsh Government use to monitor the performance of local planning authorities, and they assess it against a series of national performance indicators. It's a tool for benchmarking, but some members may be aware that over the years there's been quite significant data provided to allow authorities to benchmark. Since the COVID pandemic, that data has been limited, although over the 22-23 year, there has been performance data published on the way authorities deal with planning applications. So the report this year does have some data against which we could benchmark. A couple of the key highlights really in the report: 96% of planning applications we dealt with were dealt with within agreed timescales. An agreed timescale is where the determination period of 8 weeks has been exceeded, but with agreement with the applicant or amended plans have been submitted, that extends the timescale for determining that planning application. 78% were dealt with within the 8 weeks, which, as is noted in the report, is the best in Wales, and the All Wales average is 52%. In terms of appeals, 66% of appeals, the authority's decision was upheld. You'll notice there is a comment in the report as to why we feel that is the case, that certainly there was one particular inspector who seemed to allow a lot of appeals, whereas other inspectors didn't. And moving forward, the last year, we're up to around about 80% of appeals being dismissed. So, you'll notice going forward a change in that statistic. Councillor Hopkins mentioned fee income. There's been no planning application fee increases since 2020. That has obviously a significant impact on income being received by the authority, particularly as costs have increased. The result of that is I had 2 staff on temporary contracts, planning performance agreement. Money was used to fund those posts. Over the last year, I've lost 2 staff for various reasons, and those posts haven't been able to be filled. So the 2 planning performance agreement posts are no longer in the structure moving forward. So there's obviously going to be a pressure on resources as a result of that. In terms of enforcement, that's the area which was most affected by COVID. We were unable to carry out site visits. That led to a backlog, and we're still feeling the effects of that backlog because we're having to catch up really on the cases, and everything else has been knocked back because of that. Other than that, I think the planning committee considered this report in October last year. So it sets out in detail our performance over the year, the context against which decisions are made, the local plan sort of aims and objectives, and the structures and so on of the department are all set out in detail in the report. So I think, Chair, if there's any questions, really probably the best thing to do would be to take any questions from members.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Are there any members with any questions? Councillor Black?
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of things. Enforcement obviously is a big issue. I think, with 84 days is nearly 3 months, and that's just to investigate it. And then you have to serve notices on top of that. So clearly that does have an impact, particularly where a use of a particular property is intruding upon the needs of the community. So I'm just wondering, how far into the backlog are we actually there? And are we going to be able to improve that in future? Well, in the next year, perhaps. That's the first question on that one.
Well, obviously, this is the 22-23 report. I've had a look at the figures for 23-24. There is a slight improvement, but not significant. So we need to be looking really at the 24-25 year to go forward. One of the issues I know I'm going to face within the team, I mentioned resources.
Yeah.
I've had to use some enforcement officers to pick up planning applications. So that's having an impact on the work the enforcement officers can do. And perhaps if I could just provide a bit of clarity, the investigation complete date is the date in which the complainant is notified of the action the council is going to take. So it doesn't close the complaint. It doesn't mean nothing's been done on the complaint. The investigations have taken place, but we've had to prioritise in some cases, and it's that communication to the complainant as to what action is going to be taken. And it may be no action's being taken, but it's that notification is the date there. So there's not going to be a short-term improvement. It's got to be a medium to longer-term improvement.
And in terms of resources, I mean, I think we've been lobbying the Welsh Government on planning fees. Have we had any response on that at all?
I was in a meeting last week. Planning Officer Society of Wales and Welsh Government representatives were there. There's going to be a consultation on planning fees over the next few months. And it's not just looking at an increase in fees. I think it's going to look at the whole structure of fees and where fees are payable. But the indications were there's unlikely to be an increase in the financial year. It's more likely to be starting. Any increase would be the next financial year.
I think I know we have higher fees for the more complex and larger cases, but it seems to me that's where the big issue is in terms of use of our resources compared to what they pay us.
I think the smaller applications
Yeah.
are less likely to be cost recovery. So a householder application, for example, costs £230.
Yeah. I remember.
The cost of processing that application would cost the authority a lot more. And one of the things Welsh Government have looked at in the past is full cost recovery.
Right.
And I think as part of the consultation, they will be looking at that, but obviously it's not out as yet, but the indications are they are going to be looking at that as part of the consultation.
Okay, just one more question, Chair. I mean, I noticed the table of Section 106 is here. I'm just wondering what resources do we have to ensure these Section 106 conditions, etc., are actually properly delivered by us? We do rely on people coming back to us and reporting changes, or do we have to monitor it regularly?
Over the last few years, we have set up a working group with the commercial services team, and we've got quite a robust database in place now. So we highlight what the Section 106 requirements are, what the trigger points will be. We use our monitoring report with the policy team to look at delivery and when those trigger points are being met. And as soon as those trigger points are being met, invoices are being sent out. So there's a much more robust scheme in place, which is much more effective in ensuring the payments that are due are being received by the authority.
Anyone else online?
Yeah.
Councillor Linda James.
Going back to enforcement, I've found that the enforcement officers do come and investigate complaints, but after that, there's no action. Nothing happens. 2 years on, whatever has been complained about is still there. There seems to be no further action taken, even though a resident has been told to take something down, such as gates or a shed, it's still there. So I just wondered if we're going to start improving on the actual enforcement.
There's several issues here. One is we don't always take action. There may be a breach of planning control, but the government advice is that unless it's unacceptable, don't pursue enforcement action. So if planning permission would be granted, we wouldn't serve an enforcement notice. Where enforcement notices are served, there's a right of appeal. Appeals are taking a long time at the moment with Welsh Government because you need specialist enforcement inspectors. We've got cases which have been with Welsh Government for over 12 months where enforcement notices have been served. And the other issue is the backlog. You know, we're trying to work through quite a significant number of complaints, and we have to prioritise. And sometimes I appreciate everyone is concerned when they make a complaint. They're concerned about the development, but we have to prioritise some complaints over others, which is why some will be longer being resolved.
Okay, Linda.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Matthew Jones.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Ian. Ian, could you clarify, please, about sort of environmental projects with regards to solar farms and wind farms, whether the laws changed with regards to community benefits offered, like 106 money, to these projects? My understanding is that they don't have to offer any sort of community benefit going forward.
Community benefits are contained in Section 106 sort of requirements, and there's clear legislation and case laws to the circumstances in which community benefits can be achieved. There's legal tests which have to be met on any application where you're looking for a Section 106 contribution. With some of the larger solar farms, they're not actually dealt with by the council. They're classed as developments of national significance. So it's the Welsh Government and the inspectors who determine whether those community benefits are necessary and required to facilitate that development. So There's been no change in the law, so the legal position is still the same. It's an assessment really of each case as to whether it's justified to ask for community benefits.
Sorry, could I come back in
Okay.
there, Chair?
Certainly, Paul.
At what point then is it at the time of approval maybe that the, for argument's sake, the PEDW would make the decision on any community benefit?
Yes, it would form part of the consideration. So if it's a development of national significance, the issue would be raised as part of the process. And then when the decision is made, whether it's the inspector or it's referred up to the Welsh Minister to make the decision, they would consider whether that community benefit is justified and should form part of the decision.
Okay, Matthew? Is that all right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ian.
Councillor Chris Evans?
Yeah, thanks. With the report that we get through from enforcement, generally it just advises us that the case has been closed. It doesn't actually give us what action, if any, has been taken. Is there any chance that that could be added to the reports?
Yeah, we are looking at it. It needs to be worked on with our IT department, and we have started that work. So in the short term, we thought it was better just to get a report out to advise members of the cases that have been closed in that ward. But it is something which we are trying to get resolved with IT.
Okay, Chris. Councillor Susan Jones?
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered on the 106 agreement, how often developers actually go back on that agreement and alter it? And if there's any way that we can monitor that?
I don't have a figure in front of me. It does happen, and we've taken a few back to planning committee where, for example, viability has been raised as an issue in terms of delivering section 106 agreements. I can certainly look over a few years and give you a figure and perhaps report back in writing, Chair, if that's okay.
That's fine. Okay. Susan?
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other members? No? I've got a couple of questions for you, Ian. 3.6 on the report. Percentage of members made decisions contrary to officer advice is reduced from 24% in 2016 down to 3% in 2022. Does that mean that members aren't diligent enough, or is it that that is one hell of a reduction? And considering that we're a democratic organisation, I would have thought members would have had a little bit more input, but it is an interesting figure, and I wonder if you could comment on it, please.
Yeah, I think one of the key factors is in 2019, the LDP was adopted. So the period before it come to the end of the lifespan of the previous development plan, we had a number of applications coming in which were speculative. But since 2019 and the plan's been adopted, I think the applications submitted are more likely to be in line with the plan. So when applications come to committee, they're less controversial. And there's a clear policy framework for considering those applications. And I think generally the nature of applications, particularly over the last couple of years, has you haven't seen the significant larger controversial applications being submitted, and as a result, the number going to committee are reduced. That could potentially result in overturns.
Thank you. One question I'd like to ask: do we charge a fee for monitoring?
When you say monitor, do you mean section 106 monitoring, or do you mean
all section 106 or any other monitoring that the planning department has to do? I understand that in England there are now discussions about that fee being implemented right across the board, so that not just for 106, but for highways work and other work that is sanctioned by the planning department on behalf of the authority.
In terms of section 106 agreements, there is a monitoring fee included as part of that, and that's, as I mentioned, the work with the commercial services department. We use that to deliver that sort of service and that monitoring. In terms of planning applications generally, so if you check in, has someone complied with the approved plans or complied with conditions and so on, there's no monitoring fee as part of that process. I mentioned earlier the planning fee consultation. That may be something that comes up or certainly could be raised as part of that process. But at the moment, there's no provision.
Just to let you know that in England, that process is in train to actually charge for all monitoring of all sites. Okay, if there are no other questions, can I thank Ian for coming along and giving us this report? I know that it's of interest to many members, and thank you again for that, and Councillor Hopkins as well. Next item on the agenda is the annual review of work. Has anybody any questions on that? Any reflections on the work that we've actually carried out? No?
I think, Chair, I know we discussed this before in terms of the review of all the development plans we used to get to come to committee. I know we met that by email. I think it would be useful if we had it in front of committee at least once or twice a year, so that we could actually ask questions on it as a whole. Because I know the situation I understand it now is it's sent to us by email. If we want to bring something up in committee, we ask for it to put on the agenda. But it might be useful as well just to have the whole thing in front of the committee at least maybe every 4 months, maybe whatever, just so that we could go through it in as a committee at some stage as well.
This is something we've been discussing about, and the fact that we probably have it 3 times a year, every 4 months, because there isn't sufficient movement within the development to justify it every month.
And one of the reasons why we merged the committees was because a lot of these developments were coming to an end. But it's still useful to have that in front of us as a committee, as well as getting it by email every month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Jones? Sorry, that was number item 9 is the letters on page 64. Oh, Councillor Jeff Jones.
It's the reply from Councillor Robert Francis Davis with regard to the city deal funding. I can remember from the outset the city deal funding allocation from Westminster and Welsh Government equated out to about 1.5 million per annum over 15 years, which works out at about 23 million. What actually brought this to my attention was a reply to Councillor Stewart Rice put a question into council, and I think the answer really was about 18 million, and another question actually came to about 13 or 40 million, which was 32 million. Now, the difference between the 23 and the 32 million, I'm a little bit confused. We seem to be having a lot more funding from the city deal. Has the original agreement been changed? Or I know we've actually got the innovation matrix and innovation precinct, but that's the university. I'm actually talking about monies coming to the local authority. What's actually down here is 36 million. So how was it actually gone from 23 million to 36 million? A little bit confused. I may be wrong, but
Councillor Robert Francis Davis. Oh, okay. Sorry, Councillor Robert. Leader, sorry about that. I didn't notice your hand on the screen.
No problem, Chair. If I understood Councillor Jones's question correctly, I think what he's referring to is the fact that we've benefited from accelerated funding within the city deal. The original profile of funding from the government was one set out over the 15 years. The UK government have in recent years offered accelerated funding towards the deal, and we benefited from that. So that may account for what Councillor Jones has raised, but I'm more than happy to give a further detailed answer to the committee in writing.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was aware of the accelerated funding, but really I don't think the original 23 million has actually been altered by that, but I'd appreciate clarification.
Okay, Leader?
Yeah, that's fine.
Councillor Peter Black?
Yeah, just going on the same letter, but on Debenhams, I noticed the breakdown of additional funding. I know this is counting the pennies, but the purchase of 50 number LED lights and stands. I can understand the rest of the expense. I just can't understand why we're spending money on LED lights and stands as part of that. Do we have any explanation for that at all?
This is for the interior when we're lighting at this moment in time.
I understand that, but it's not in use. We don't know what we're going to do with the building.
When obviously for surveying, etc.
Oh, it's for health and safety for people doing the survey.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay, that's fine. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
Mr. Ralph, do you want to? Paul?
Yeah, that's fair enough. Health and safety, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
All right. Okay. That's the letters. Can I now move item 10 on the agenda, which is the exclusion of the public for reasons that are set out about the confidential nature of the item we're about to discuss. Can someone please move? Moved by Councillor Black, seconded by Councillor Locke. Okay, then is the leader going to start this, or Councillor Robert Francis?